So when it comes to protecting yourself from the elements in a rapidly changing environment, if a storm is rolling in, your ability to quickly put up a shelter could make a big difference in your ability to keep your body core temperature under control. So a system that I want to kind of show you and introduce you to is called the 5-minute shelter system. That 5-minute shelter system is designed to put up a variety of different tarp shelters or poncho shelters, if that's what you have, really quickly in the event you need to get one up really fast to beat a storm coming in, or if you need to get yourself some shelter because you're wet for whatever reason. So that system starts with what I call the rapid Ridgeline, and everything is based off of that Ridgeline. There are a handful of knots that you need to know in order to tie that rapid Ridgeline up. And this is something that you would set up before you ever go out into the wilderness. You set up your Ridgeline. I'll show you how to hank it up so that it deploys rapidly without ever getting tangled. And the key to this is you should be able to put this up within about a minute, and that gives you a few extra minutes to put the tarp shelter up so you can get under it and protect yourself from the elements. So the rapid Ridgeline starts with an anchor knot on one end, but in order to get that anchor knot, we're going to start with a fixed loop. And there are a number of different knots you can use, but there's so many knots out there that a beginner doesn't really know where to begin. So we teach it this way because this is a knot that you can use, and this is a knot that applies to several other things within the system that we teach. So the bowline is what we're going to start with. Before we get into tying the knot, I want to go over a little bit of rope terminology. In this case, it's cordage, but the terminology is the same. When we're working with the rope, we have the end that we're actually working with, that we're tying on. That's often called the running end. And then the portion that we're not using is often called the standing end. So running end, working end are sometimes used interchangeably. You may hear it different ways. But the running end and the standing end. Then the other terminology you should be familiar with is the difference between a bight and a loop. A bight is when you fold the rope or the cordage over and create this bight, but this doesn't cross over itself anywhere. If it crosses over itself anywhere, then that's considered a loop. And there's underhand loops, overhand loops. That really doesn't matter as long as you understand the difference between a bight and an actual loop. Now with that information, we can start to tie the bowline, and we're tying an end of the line bowline. And there are a number of different ways that you can tie this. If you've learned it a different way and you're proficient at it, then I recommend you stick with that unless you just want to learn another skill, because more skill is always going to be better than less skill. But I teach it this way because this method of teaching it and this baseline that we're starting with applies to several other knots within the system that I teach. So I teach it this way. Again, if you know another way and are comfortable with that, go ahead and use that. So everything is based on the overhand knot. All right, an overhand knot is very simple. What you do is create a loop in the running end, and then that loop continues. The end of the running end just comes right back through that loop, and then you pull that tight. That is a simple overhand knot. Now, if I wanted to take that and turn that into an overhand slip, meaning I'm creating a slip knot out of that overhand, I still create my loop, and rather than bringing the end all the way through to create that overhand, which is often used as a stopper knot, I'm going to actually push a bight through. I still have that overhand knot, but I've also created a slip side over here. So that is an overhand slip knot. If I open this up a little bit more so that you can look at it, when I created this overhand slip knot, and this isn't dressed down, I've got what I call a clean side, which is the actual slip side, and the dirty side where the overhand is starting to form. So when I'm tying a bowline, and that applies to several other knots as well that we may get time to do later, I start with a fairly short piece of running end, about 8 inches. I create a loop where the rope or the line crosses over itself. I bring a bight up through that loop to create the beginnings of an overhand slip. So I've got my clean side to my right and my dirty side over to my left. Now with it in that configuration, I'm going to take the running end and going from my chest out, if you think of it that way, I'm going to go with the running end through that bite that I created. Give myself a little bit of a tail. And then I'm going to take the end again and fold it back on itself after going through that bite. All right, so I'll show you that one more time. Clean side is right, dirty side is left. From my direction out, through that bite, fold it over onto itself, and then I'm going to pinch where I folded that over onto itself, and I can let go of the rest. Now when I pull on the standing end to dress that knot up, my bowline is going to form. And when you're looking at your bowline, there are a couple of checking points. So I'm looking at the back side of the bowline, you're looking at the front side. You've got your tail to your bowline that used to be your running end. That is on the inside of the loop that you created. And this loop needs to be big enough to be useful for whatever application you're using it for. With that fixed loop, with the tail in the center, I've got a teardrop shape right here with a cross locking bar, and that's what holds that knot together. So that is a properly tied bowline, tail on the inside of the loop. That checking point is your teardrop shape. Your standing end comes through that loop, and you have a cross locking bar there. So that's how we create our bowline. The backside, as you're looking at it, will look sort of like a triangle. So that's how we created the bowline, and that's based on the overhand slip. Now with this end of the line bowline, we're going to do what's called a running bowline or a toggled running bowline to establish the initial anchor point for our ridgeline. So with the fixed loop that we created with the end of the line bowline, in order to secure it to the anchor point, we're going to use either a running bowline, which is made by simply taking the other end of the ridgeline and coming through the loop of the bowline that you created and tightening it down. And I like to do my shelters at about waist level depending on the weather. So that is a simple running bowline. If I want to put a quick release in this, then what I can do is what's called a toggled running bowline, where instead of bringing the now new running end through, what I can do is push a bite through instead of pushing the end through. And then you can toggle that with either a stick or another tent stake, place that inside that bite, and then pull against the tree. And that is a toggled running bowline. And if I want to get this down quickly, all I have to do is pull that toggle, and that releases the knot, and I can wrap up my ridgeline and leave. So that is the running bowline and the toggled running bowline. But the baseline that you do beforehand is to start with your rapid ridgeline having the end of the line bowline in place already. So to establish your anchor point on the far side, we've established the near side with a toggled running bowline or a running bowline. To establish your far side, we're going to do a modified trucker's hitch. And what a trucker's hitch is it's a hitch, which means it's an anchor, but it's also, it gives you a mechanical advantage because you're coming back through it sort of like you're doing a kind of a modified type pulley system. So with this, I want to come around the anchor, and I want to determine about waist height still. I want to determine, one, how much stretch I'm going to have in this paracord or whatever kind of line I'm using, but I want to establish a trucker's hitch here, and I'm going to start that with, there's a number of slip knots you can use, but of course to keep it simple, I'm going to use the overhand slip. So again, for the overhand slip, I'm creating a loop. Once I have that loop established, I'm going to push a bite up through, and I've got my overhand slip once again. All right, So I've got my dirty side going towards the initial anchor point because that's the way the tension is going to pull, and a lot of times you'll hear that called the tractor knot or the mule knot because it's actually pulling. Think of pulling like a team of mules. But the dirty side is towards the original anchor point where the tension is going to be. The clean side, the slip side, is towards my new anchor point. So that establishes a fixed loop, but it's a slip knot, overhand slip being applied again. I come around my anchor point, and for a normal trucker's hitch, all I would do is bring my new running end through that loop, and then pulling tension back this way gives me that mechanical advantage to really pull this ridgeline nice and tight. With this, what you would do is end up pinching this off when you get it to the tension you want, and then while that's pinched, you'll have to tie that off to hold the tension. So a modification that I learned during Robin Sage, during the Q course, that I think is very beneficial, is instead of going through here once, I'll go through a second time. And what that does is create a round turn, or what I like to call a rolling hitch, because this is actually going to roll over on itself when I pull tension, and it's going to hold that tension for me. So running through your slip knot that you created the loop with twice, when I pull this, it's going to roll over on itself. And if I let go and release the tension, it maintains that tension for me because that rolling hitch is actually bitten down onto itself and won't release the tension. So I can tie whatever knot I need to secure here without holding that tension. So I'm going to get that as tight as I want it. Let go, it holds the tension. Now I'm going to take and form a bite, and here I'm going to secure this with a half hitch on a bite, or a half hitch quick release. So I create a bite that gives me this small little window right here, and I'll bring another bite up through there, like so. And then depending on the size of the loop that I want, I'll maintain that, and I'll milk this tension out and slide that half hitch right up against that round turn that I made for this trucker's hitch. And this loop I'll incorporate into the rest of my shelter system. But if I need to take this down, it's a very simple process. I pull this because it's on a quick release. When I pull tension this way, it actually rolls on itself and gets tight. So I'm going to pull the opposite direction to release it. Slide that out. And now, because this is a slip knot, the slip knot has been under tension, so it's going to be a little more tight. But you can simply pull on that and it'll snap right out and you're ready to go. No knots, complete recovery of cordage, which is a precious resource. So that is the modified trucker's hitch that we're using for our far side anchor on our ridgeline. So we're going to put a couple of different loops on here, and those loops are going to be used for the grommets on our actual tarp or poncho, whatever you're using for your main shelter. And I like to use at least 2 for the system, but sometimes I'll put 3 on the line and have those pre-staged because I can use 2 for my shelter. I can slide the 3rd one anywhere on that ridge line that I want and actually hang a candle lantern on there, hang my headlamp, hang something up. So it's just convenient to have 3, but you only need 2. But to create the fisherman's loop, the fisherman's knot is also known as the necklace knot, because what we're doing is creating 2 opposing overhands, and each overhand is tied on the other leg of the loop. So to create that overhand, as you might have guessed, you oppose the ends. And you kind of get a little bit of an overlap. It doesn't matter how much because this knot slides back and forth. That's why it's used as a necklace knot oftentimes. So I'm going to take one end and kind of isolate that one end, and I'm going to wrap it around the opposite leg of the loop. And when I do that, I'm going to wrap it around and create an overhand. So all I have to do is create a loop and then continue that loop around with the end coming back up through the loop that I created. Pull that tight, and that is an overhand. Now to keep it simple so I can tie the same direction, I'll just flip the entire thing around. Now I'm isolating this side and I'm tying an overhand around this opposite leg. Create a loop. Continue that same direction around, come through that loop with the end and create my overhand. So this can slide to make this loop smaller, like so. Or the way we're going to use it is pull it tight and those opposing overhands now lock into each other. So no matter how tight you pull it, I guess the more you pull it, the tighter the knot actually gets. They're opposing, they pull into each other. And I've created about a 5 to 6 inch loop right there. Now with that loop, I'm going to tie a Prusik knot onto my ridgeline. And that Prusik knot is going to allow me to slide back and forth and configure this in any way that I want. So for the Prusik knot, a Prusik knot is designed, it's a friction hold knot, and it's designed for a line, cordage, or rope of smaller diameter to be tied onto line, cordage, or rope of larger diameter. That's what really gives it its strength in holding. So this number 36 bank line, tarred mariner's line, is a smaller diameter than this 550 paracord. So I'm going to offset that knot because I don't want this fisherman's knot to interfere with the Prusik knot or interfere with the grommet on my tarp. So I'm going to offset that. With that loop, I'm going to place that loop directly where I want to tie it. And then all you have to do is bring the end around the ridge line and back up through that loop. If you only come through once, that's what is called a lark's head knot. And a lark's head is that kind of hitch that is around a kind of small diameter object. If this same thing was around a larger diameter object, then this would also be called a girth hitch. It's another name for this style knot, just depends on the diameter of what it's tied around. It's all tied the same. But if I open that back up a little bit, if I want to create a Prusik, I've just got to come through a second time. Going through once is a lark's head. Going through a second time is what is called a 4-wrap Prusik knot. And with a Prusik knot, you've got 4 parallel wraps. You've got a cross locking bar across the front, and your 2 lines on the inside parallel wraps are coming right down the middle. It doesn't cross over itself anywhere. And by design, the way it works is with this locking bar in place, that creates tension, that squeezes, that friction squeeze around whatever you're anchored to. If you pull tension left or right with that locking bar tight, it doesn't slide. If you want to slide it anywhere else on the ridge line, you just push down on that locking bar to unlock it, and you can slide it anywhere you need to slide it. Lock it in place by pulling tight and locking that locking bar, and it won't slide any longer. So I want to create a more secure amount of friction, so I'm going to do a 6-wrap Prusik. So all I have to do is open this loop back up a little bit and come through a 3rd time. When I come through that 3rd time, that'll give me 6 parallel wraps with that cross locking bar, and it's going to give me that much more hold on the ridge line. I've came through 3 times. Now I have 6 parallel wraps with that cross locking bar. My 2 innermost center wraps are the ones that are coming down into the loop. It's not crossing over itself anywhere. I can tighten that up and tighten that locking bar, and now I've got a 6-wrap Prusik that holds really well. This fisherman's knot is offset so it doesn't interfere with the Prusik knot and doesn't interfere with the fixed loop that I've created that I'm going to use for the grommets on my tarp or poncho shelter. So I'm going to tie another one of those so that I have at least 2 on here. Tie my fisherman's knot really quick. Overhand on one side, overhand on the other. Tighten that down, create that loop, come through once, come through a second time, come through a third time. That gives me my 6 wraps. Start slowly pulling that tight and getting all of my wraps parallel to where they're not crossing over each other. And there is my second Prusik loop. Let's talk about how to hank this Ridgeline so that it comes out tangle free every single time and you're set up for success for getting it up quickly. So we have our end of the line bowline on the one side, which becomes our first anchor point. And then we have our Prusik fisherman's loops that we've placed on there. And when we do this, we want to hank this in such a way that the bowline doesn't get in the way and get tangled, and neither of these Prusik loops tangle and get in the way. So you don't want them too far forward, because if you put them too far forward, then when you go to wrap it around the tree really quickly and toggle that off to establish your first anchor point, your Prusik loops are on the back side and they're trapped by that toggle. They can't be brought down the ridgeline because they're trapped, and you'll have to redo it. So based on the size of the trees you're typically working with in your area, you want to kind of slide these down to that length. And we're using some pretty large trees where we're at right now, so I'm going to give myself quite a bit of room to get around a very large diameter tree and have those still forward of the toggle when I do my toggled running bowline. So with that, I'll take that loop and place it on the back side of my hand to get that bowline out of the way. I'll kind of squeeze and hold that with my thumb, and I'm going to take the rest and using my pinky and my thumb as sort of a template, sort of a kind of a jig. I'm going to wrap this around in a figure 8. And then when I get to where those loops are, I want those loops to end up on the back side along with my bowline, so they're out of the way. So that's good right there. Then I'm going to continue my figure 8 loops over my thumb, over my pinky. I'm going to keep doing that until I get to where I have about 4 feet of cordage left hanging down. And for me, when my hand is about at chest level, when it's just touching the ground, that's about 4 feet. That gives me enough excess to wrap this bundle up and keep it from tangling up in my pack. So I'll take my thumb on my opposite hand, slide it behind all of those wraps, and then I'll grab it and pull it off my thumb and finger. So I've got all of that hanked up just like that. I'm going to take that additional 3 to 4 feet that I have hanging down, and I'm going to start wrapping that from one end towards the other. Once I get down to where I only have, 10 inches, 8 to 10 inches left, as I come around, instead of just wrapping it around, I'm going to come around and come back through that same loop to create a half hitch. That'll give that end a little bit of security, and I'll typically do a second half hitch, because as the name implies, a half hitch is only half of a knot. 2 half hitches create a good knot. So now that that's configured like this, I can throw it down on my pack, and I don't have to worry about it getting tangled because both ends are secured away from each other and it's properly hanged. So this way, when I get up to the anchor point that I want to put it around, I can hold the hank, pull out the length that I need. I can drop this in its entirety and it's not going to tangle. Come around, toggle it. Then I can pick this loop up and just walk all the way across. Nothing ever gets tangled. So that's how you hank this for rapid deployment. And once you get the hang of it, it's quite quick. Got about 4 feet left. Start wrapping it around. One half hitch. Second half hitch. And that is a properly hanked rapid Ridgeline system. Excuse me.
Are you rolling over?